am 50% anarchist, 50% IWW, 100% from the Balkans. And the interesting question there might be, why am I writing, talking, speaking about Wobblies and Zapatistas? Well, I do that because I think that Wobblies and Zapatistas are actually exemplary. They are paradigmatic as to how we should organize today. The Wobblies, the industrial workers of the world, Zapatistas, I mean, this is a room full of French, so I'm sure that you know everything about them that there is to be known. But let me just rephrase some of the things that I think are worthy of remembering. As far as I understand the Zapatista experience, the man who took the name Marcos, or Subcomandante Marcos, left together with some of his students as a member of a fairly traditional Marxist sect, Mexico City University called UNAM, in order to go and join and, in the language that we use in the book, accompany Mayans. And for 10 years, after the process of accompaniment, they all came together with 1994, with the uprising. That changed many lives, definitely changed or deeply influenced my life. This experience goes beyond physical relocation. There are many different elements to Zapatismo. One element is, and the one interesting thing, is that Marxists were more influenced by Mayans than Mayans by Marxists. They discovered a process where everything goes through assemblage, that the process of Mayan, essentially anarchistic way of life, that influenced them profoundly. And this is the first layer of Zapatismo. Second layer of Zapatismo is, of course, the Mexican Revolution and legacy of Mexican Revolution. The third, which is still very much alive, of course, in Chiapas. The third element of Zapatista experience would be theology of liberation. Theology of liberation around Bishop Samuel Ruiz, around something that's called taking conscience, around creating very complex combinations of Christianity and liberation theology and Mayan spirituality. All of this produced a wonderful synthesis. And synthesis like this could not be created, have been created in a university library. It needed to be discussed, rediscussed, practiced, and practiced again by people, students, professors, who actually left the university in order to meet these people, prepared to live a life in a society, in a setting that's quite different than the university in Mexico City. Wobblies, on the other hand, present something that I have to say I'm extremely proud to be a part of that tradition. Industrial Workers of the World came into being in 1905. And they came into being as a very heterogeneous group of radicals. They included everybody from Western Federation of Miners, which left shortly after the formation of the Wobblies, but left behind one of the most charismatic labor leaders of all time, Big Bill Haywood. There were a union of people who, of agricultural workers, of migrants, who went from north or south, who hopped the trains illegally, of blacks and whites who labored together at a time which was extraordinary in American history, on docks of Philadelphia and also in the soft woods of Deep South. They worked together and they were open to women, they were open to migrants, and they were open to African Americans in a way that was, for that time, really, really unusual. The Wobblies were against what they were calling American separation of labor. They believed, and they expressed this in their preamble, in their manifesto, in the Industrial Workers of the World, and here we have the editor today of Industrial Workers of the World, or SOL, as Wobblies are referring to this journal. Preamble, that is saying that we need to organize in one big union. One big union where injury to one is going to be an injury to all. And Preamble observed that by organizing industrially, we are going to create a society, a new structure in the shell of the old. Now, the Wobblies survived. The Wobblies, I mean, there wasn't a movement like the Wobblies before, and there wasn't a movement like the Wobblies ever since. Imagine a movement, imagine a union, which invites people from all over the United States to come to the Western cities, where people are fighting for the free speech, the famous free speech fights of the Wobblies, saying, come to defend our Bill of Rights. And then you have thousands of people jumping trains, going illegally to Western towns in order to be detained, to be arrested, in order to fill the jails until they are released, until they can mount their soapbox and argue against wage slavery, demanding the abolishment of the wage system. This didn't happen once, this didn't happen twice, this happened at least 30 times. These were the Wobblies, and we never had anything like this ever since. Wobblies brought back to life something that I call, together with Stoughton Lynn, Haymarket synthesis. Haymarket synthesis began with Haymarket anarchists in Chicago. These are the people who took very seriously the idea that anarchism and Marxism should be understood together in the form of a synthesis. And they did their best to live this until their very untimely death. They believed in something that's called Chicago idea. Not too many people today remember the Chicago idea. The idea was to create a militant trade unions that are going to become the germs of new industrial order. Wobblies kept this synthesis alive. There are many elements to Wobbly experience. The central element, of course, is direct action. Direct action is understood by the Wobblies, for example, are the workers of Schenectady, not too far from here in New York, who left their work, who were actually the ones who invented the famous sit-in strikes that made famous in 1937 in Flint, Michigan. People who would, lumber workers, who would leave their job after 8 hours. Direct action was a backbone of Wobblies, backbones of what Wobblies were. Wobblies hated this, what they called spittoon philosophers, people who would come, the so-called theorists, who would come there and who would speak and who would talk about theory all the time. They were bored to death. They never believed in that. That's why Daniel Leon had to leave the Wobblies, one of many reasons. The other central element of the Wobbly experience is a very relationship with... they didn't believe in hierarchy. They had a very critical relationship of hierarchical leadership. In 1916, a ship called Verona, full of Wobblies, arrived to Everett to take place in Washington in free speech fights. It was full of Wobblies. Sheriff McRae was waiting the Wobblies, and he asked, "Who is your leader?" And then all of a sudden, unmistakably, every single Wobbly said, "We are all leaders." He started shooting and he killed 5. That is another central element of Wobbly experience. Wobblies were internationalists in the best possible way that we can imagine. Again, Joe Hill, as Franklin Rosamond, who died a few days ago, one of the best historians of the Wobblies, reminded us Joe Hill was not only a Swedish immigrant who went to Mexico to fight in the Mexican Civil War, he was also very fond of Chinese cooking. Wobblies created a context of internationalism that should be inspired, that should sustain us and that should inspire us as we are looking for new concrete ways of expressing it in the 21st century. There are many facets to what Wobblies are. But there is a third story that's not covered by the title Wobblies and Zapatistas that I would like to share. And this is the story that I'm intimately involved together with Stoughton Lynn. This is the story of Lucasville Prison. I don't know if you know of Lucasville Prison uprising. It's not really well known outside of Ohio. In 1993, between April 11 and April 23rd, the longest prison rebellion in the history of the United States exploded. Namely, the prisoners of Ohio Penitentiary, one of the most vicious penitentiaries in the United States, started a rebellion. And it was a remarkable rebellion for many reasons. After a negotiated surrender, 5 of them were arrested because of the death of 9 people. 9 people were killed during this rebellion. 5 people were condemned to sentenced to death, and their name is Lucasville 5. Today they are known as Lucasville 5. The remarkable thing about Lucasville is that the prisoners organized a united front. When State Highway Patrol entered Lucasville after the occupation, they found a graffiti on the wall saying, "One race, convict race. No whites, no blacks, only blues," the color of the uniform. It's quite extraordinary.